much better.
That is a beautiful tunic, dude. That's gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Soraya, but she's the one who made it. She was out of St. Louis for a while, moved to Germany. She's married to Hanosuke, who's a guy that's been kind of all over the place. But this was one of the last tunics that she made before she left St. Louis and the country. So I'm super happy about it though. It was such a good investment.
Yeah. So. It's a unique color too. Like that is a teal, I'm assuming, that you don't, blue, whatever you want to call it, that you don't see on the field too often.
Yeah. So I think it's funny every time, because 40K comes up conversationally a lot, and I think it's hilarious because people will be like, oh wow, you play 40K, and I'll be like, yeah, well who do you collect? Like, well, I'm wearing teal and gray and I've got hydras on my shoulders, so beats me. I don't know who I could possibly be.
Take a guess.
Yeah, and it originally started as an Alpha Legion tunic, and then it was okay, well, what else can I throw on this to make it interesting? So I've got the symbol of the Golden Horde on the front, and I've got the Takeda Clanmon on the back, and then down at the bottom I've got a Latin phrase that I'm fond of that I first saw in Rome Total War, where it's Fortis Cadere Cedere Non Potest, and it's the brave can die but they cannot yield. So I've just got stuff from all over the place. Let's take Rome, Mongolia, Japan, and the Imperium of Mankind, and throw it together with a nice little collection of colors and call it a day.
I love it. So I'm a little hurt you didn't go with the white scars though. You got the Mongolian theme, the white scars are right up there, man.
But okay, the white scars are a super cool idea, but they come down to the Ricky Bobby of 40K, right? They want to go fast, and that's up until the books came out, the 30K novels came out that really started delving into the white scars and made them more than just we're obsessed with speed. They were really boring, and 7th edition came out, or maybe it was 8th edition, where grav guns came around, and it was okay, now we're gonna have white scars squadrons with grav guns, we're just gonna mow things down and there's nothing you can do to stop us, and we've got actual things. 5th and 6th edition bikes were just not good, so white scars armies were expensive, they didn't kill stuff, so the Alpha Legion though has this weird allure to them where they everything that they do can really be accomplished by someone else. They're just, because they're functionally immortal, they can think longer term. And if all of their plans fall apart and everything goes wrong, at the end of the day, they're still Astartes. So at the bare minimum, they're some of the deadliest warriors that there are, but everything that they do relies on not being that. And that's kind of the last resort. Whereas that's everyone else's plan A, plan B, and plan C. For the Alpha Legion, that's, everything's backup is I guess at the end of the day, we're still Space Marines. And I think that's hilarious. So big fan of their style.
That's pretty neat. I have just barely touched 40K. I am on the verge. A bunch of my friends play it. I am beginning to learn how to play. And someone was like, okay, if you like the Mongolian stuff, you got to look at the white scars. And I haven't read any of the lore. And so the only thing I really know about it is I like them, and I like the giant protector guys. Custodes. I think they're cool. And then I also like the nuns who drop churches from heaven. I think that's pretty neat too. You know what I mean? It's a cool world. I think I can get into this.
Yeah. So, okay. For someone who's new to it, Games Workshop is weird because they started in the 80s, and I feel like they really got involved in making something they had no idea what they were going to do with, where it's so these guys, we're going to call them the Space Marines, and our flagship Space Marine group, they're really good. We're going to call them the Ultramarines, and they didn't have any, I feel like they didn't know where to go with anything. And then they got this phenomenal list of authors who started writing for them. I mean, several of the authors for the lore of 40K are some of my favorite authors, period. And they took that and they expanded it in such amazing ways. And like now all of the chapters have very unique, likable things about them. And it just kind of goes on from there, and it used to be you could kind of sum up each chapter with like kind of one line about them, and like that's what they do. And now there's like layers to all of them, and there's subtlety to all of them that there just wasn't before, and I really, really enjoy that. Like the books are fantastic. If you're getting into them, enjoy the ride because they're great.
That they have finally fleshed out all of the individual things.
Yeah. Like, because the White Scars, they went from just being like, we are on we're on bikes and we're fast, and they kind of wrapped up a lot of like East Asian warfare, where it wasn't just the Mongols. They didn't just add samurai onto it, but there's a lot of like Chinese aspects of things. A lot of the lore involves delving into like they're essentially Taoist in philosophy in a way that like would not be apparent if you weren't reading the books. But the idea that like we don't want to explore the whole like psych or warp thing too far because we know that there's more out there than we should be dabbling with. So let's just be content with what we have. And they go through that in kind of an amazing way. Like as someone who has read a lot of that stuff and is very interested in a lot of that stuff, having that applied to the White Scars made me a little upset that I already had a Alpha Legion army, because the White Scars became really, really cool right then. And I would love to have them, but that's fine. They're a really nifty group. Great color scheme too.
Yeah. So I want to take a moment to take a break from our regularly scheduled programming and give a plug for my business, Dragon Masters. Over at Dragon Masters, I make woven belts for Amtgard, Dagor here, and any other LARP that you can think of. At this point, I have hundreds of belts across most of Amtgard's kingdoms and across many different realms in Dagor here in Belgarth. And my goal with these belts are to make belts that are going to last longer than you. My goal is to give you a legacy belt that you will be able to wear for as long as you want to wear it, but then we'll also be able to pass it down to that next generation, that next player in your belt line, at your park, friend, family, whatever it happens to be. All the belts that I make are made of paracord and macrame and are made of the highest quality materials. If you're interested in taking a look at my belts, there's a link in the description below for Etsy. On there, I have all sorts of belts that are ready to ship out the next day. These are ones I've already made. But if you're interested in something custom, check out my Dragon Masters Facebook page. You can go through and see all of the custom work that I have ever made, and I would love to get you a custom Knight's belt or a custom Squire belt, or maybe you're looking for something in particular for a fighting company. I will also do discounts if you want to order a large amount for your fighting company, your park. Do discounts there. So thank you for listening to my plug. Let's get back to the main action. I'm going to keep all of that in because I think that's a super interesting intro. Welcome viewers to maybe the most unique intro we've had so far. Appreciate you. You're watching the archive. If you didn't know that, our goal here is we strive to tell interesting LARP stories, preserve LARP history. I'm St. Godric, and today have Squire Bighead. So excited to have you on, man. Really appreciate you coming in.
Excellent.
And it's funny because you answered one of my first questions that I always ask. There's three paths that everyone that I've met at Amtgard did one of these three things before they got into Amtgard: either tabletop, Magic, or 40K. And I feel like you've already walked into the first question.
Well, so what's funny is I got into 40K well after I started Amtgard.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started 40K probably about a dozen years ago. Actually, I think it was just before my daughter was born. So like 13, 14 years ago. And I started Amtgard like 16, 17 years ago. I saw the episode that you had with Fuzz. That's actually the only episode of yours that I've watched all the way through. So like, sorry on that one. But yeah, so I was part of that like crowd of kids from high school that got brought out by an English teacher that happened to play Amtgard, and my first day was his last day going out. Like he showed up like one time out or after that and didn't fight. But yeah, I was big into chess and Magic the Gathering when I was little. So lots and lots of Magic the Gathering. And what was the third one? There was tabletop.
tabletop, Warhammer, or Magic.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, like Dungeons and Dragons I got into after Amtgard. Magic was a big intro. And it was funny because like Fuzz is actually the one who recruited me. We had a math class together. Cool. And he was telling me about it, and I swear, like, it's so funny. He's talking to me, and I'm like, so what is this game? He's like, oh, you can be all these different things, and it kind of goes through the class system, just very like, yeah, you can play all these different classes, and I was like, what classes are there? And he's like, so there's the barbarian, right? And I'm like, like I was hooked. I was a giddy little kid, I mean, in a other than little part, I mean, I was like 16 or 17 years old. I was a sophomore in high school when it happened. And I was just super excited. And after I got in, I used to sit there and like in class when I wasn't needing to pay attention or was needing to pay attention, just wasn't. I was like daydreaming new shots and stuff like that of like what I could throw, what I could try out. And there were so many that I started with back then was like, oh man, this should be great. And then like try to do it to another human being. And like the fact that the sword weighs things and it's not all just anime motions the whole time. Sorry about the camera there. But like all of a sudden it's like, oh, so that doesn't work at all. Like I had all these grand ideas. And every once in a while, something really panned out, and a lot of them were just like, "Oh, so that's not physically possible to do." And now I know. So I got better at shot crafting, as I went along. But those first couple of months were fascinating because I was just wrong about everything.
Fun. Well, those are some of the most fun months that I remember. Is like showing up and someone showing me how to build a sword, and then like 3 months later, someone shows me how to build a better sword. Right? And you're just like, well, I didn't even realize it was possible to do it this way, And like,
right.
The most fun.
Yeah. And I've always been garbage at like weapon construction. I've always, bought or borrowed all of my weapons. But like, and for me it was similar to that with fighting. St. Louis Amtgard at the time was an absolutely fascinating place where like we definitely did our fair share of class battles, but overwhelmingly we just kind of like ditched and trash talked, and we tended to get like really good at it. I've mentioned it online a couple of times, but like in my real life now, like any place that I go, like any place that I work, I'm always very, very comfortable talking back and forth with people because like I learned those social lines on a ditch field where like there are sometimes consequences. Like by early 2000s, mid 2000s Amtgard was a very, very different place, and like you kind of had to figure out where the lines were, or someone would show you them.
They would introduce you to the lines.
Yeah, they would point them out very directly, but like I've had coworkers sit there and be like, yeah, like I'm not ever going to make fun of Tim because I know that he will always have a response, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be ready for that. So let's just skip that entirely. And I'm like, that's fair. Like if you joke with me, I will joke back, and that gets established really, really fast. And it works out pretty well. Within like a social setting, and with work, it hasn't backfired too hard yet. So that works out too.
There you go. You said sophomore in high school, early 2000s. What version of the game? Is that 7 or is that?
So yeah, it was V6. I think we played V6 for about a year because I think that I had started maybe a year and a half. Because I think I had started leveling healer when V6 started. That was a fascinating time period because the magic system between V6 and V7 was really rather different. A lot of the class abilities were pretty different. Things like more
different from 7 to 8.
Oh gosh,
that's the only transition I've been a part of. So
yeah, I don't know if it's quite that different. Okay. I'm trying to remember certain aspects of 7 because like in V6, casters could cast an enchantment on themselves, but if they then cast any other magic, then it would dispel that enchantment. And you had like the ability to stack enchantment. So you'd have druids that cast like 4 stone skins on themselves and then would like run around and fight until they were just out of stone skins or dead, you know, and like that was a viable part of the spell list. I do remember they had some of the things I do miss about V6 was so like red weapons I feel are much simpler than the crushing breaking stuff that we have now. And there's a lot of reasons that I'm a big fan of like red or like set values as opposed to other things. But in V6, if you had a red weapon that you made red through other means, so like you're using a crushing breaking polearm and you go berserk as a barbarian, or you know you have flame blade cast on it or something like that, then it would now be double red and it counts as 2 red hits against shields. So it was so fun. Fuzz is actually the one who made it for me. I had this great sword that was like crushing breaking, and I would run out as a barbarian, and when I would go berserk it would be like swinging on shields, and it would be like double, and the person would start shaking the shield off like, so actually you're dead, right? So the first hit was 2 hits, the second one was a red shot to the shield and a shot to your arm, and then the third one was a shot to a dead arm. So like we're actually done here. And you kind of like explain that to players and hope that they were okay with that.
I get that for sure. I don't know if you cross game much, but one of the rules that I enjoy in Dag Bell is that their reds can break shields, but there is a sufficient force for it to count. Because like one of the most frustrating things for me at Amtgard is like you get a red or sometimes a magically enchanted red, and then just like doot, oh, your shield's gone. It's like come on, right. Come on now, speed pull. Yeah.
Well, and back then they outlawed this in V7, but like the old meta for like destroying shield walls used to be giving like preferably very talented fighters. I mean, obviously a sword knight or warlord is fantastic, but giving them double daggers and being berserk barbarians, and then they would just run up and it was you know, you just and they made it so that berserk, like in V7, that was the reason that in V7 barbarians couldn't use anything shorter than a short sword, was because the double dagger combo was the can opener of V6. That you just pried that open. Now I have cross gamed a bit. I always have mained Amtgard, but like one of the problems that I have with cross gaming is that in good faith, something like a sufficient force on a red hit is a fun addition to the game. But like watching people, you know, 120-pound people put all of their force into it, and watching some unpleasant person be like, that wasn't hard enough, my shield is indestructible to you, is super frustrating to see. And you know, like I feel like Amtgard at least simplifies it in that a hit is a hit is a hit, and it doesn't matter who's throwing it, who's receiving it. Like the shot is well defined, and whether people follow the rule book on that well-defined shot or not is always going to be a little up in the air. But like you should be able to point to the rule book and say, yes, that was a shot and will always be a shot, and there's no getting around that fact. So
I found it interesting because in the games with sufficient force rules, you have the question of what is too light of a hit. And then I feel like in Amtgard, we have more of the question of what is too heavy of a hit. You know what I mean? And so like, it's this weird, and I play both games a bunch, and I generally don't struggle going back and forth. I fight fairly similar in both games. It's just a little bit heavier of a stick, but my calibration doesn't really change that much. So that maybe means I hit a little too hard for Amtgard, or on the, not too hard, but on the upper end of Amtgard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me because at DAG, people are arguing over, was that hard enough? And in Amtgard, the argument is, hey, you're hitting too hard.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of weird in that, like, I min-maxed my body mechanics for Amtgard like really, really early on. So I had a lot of trouble. Like, I dabbled in the SCA for some number of months. It wasn't quite a year, I don't think. And I had an enormous amount of trouble because when I was throwing shots, I would pop at the end, which removes all of the arm and body weight from the shot and accelerates the tip just a hair, right? I mean, and so I throw, generally speaking, very light shots in Amtgard. I mean, I have exceptions, right? But like my average shot it tends to be pretty light on the scale, and I had huge difficulty getting shots taken in the SCA, and very rightly so, because my body mechanics were telling me to take my body weight out of the shot, and they were telling me like, hey, so like you're doing great stuff, it's just not good for here. It's not doing anything here. And I finally did get that recalibrated, and that was fine. So I also have the advantage of, I'm you can't necessarily tell from the camera, but for those of you who have met me, I'm kind of a hulking dude, and it's very rare that people be like, I need you to hit me harder. That's a very rare request for me. Pretty much no matter how light of shots I throw, people are happy to be like, okay, that was good. Yeah, I'm fine there, except for in the SCA where it was like, no, like that's not actually nearly hard enough for here. You're gonna have to do something else.
The most difficult thing for me when I play SCA is not calibration as much. It's I am so trained from Amtgard and DAG really to not hit people in the face.
Yes.
And so I don't mind getting hit in the head. I don't mind getting hit with their stuff. And I to the point now where my calibration is still on the lighter end, but they're starting to take it. I'm getting there. But man, I cannot train myself to throw at people's faces. Like it goes against everything that has been ingrained in my fighting DNA for 10 years now, Yeah.
So for me to transition for hard enough, I had to stop swinging at locations and start swinging in arcs. And that was the only way that I could not pop through, was just like, okay, I'm swinging this direction, and I'm going to set this distance and swing this direction. And that's the arc that I'm hitting in. Man, like for me, the troubling part with the SCA was like, I'm big about like game camaraderie, right? Like I don't think of enemies on the field, right? They're fellow players that happen to be on the other team. And I am very, very averse to just about anything that involves like hurting the other person. And most of SCA is fine, right? But I feel like every game has a reasonably similar percentage of people that just cheat.
Yep.
Right. And when people cheat in the SCA, it's just like, I think that I'm supposed to break your arm, right? Like, I don't know what else I can do, because I've just hit you about as hard as I can, and I'm a big guy and I threw it with the proper body mechanics, and you told me no, and now I feel like I have to swing for less armored spots and harder for this to work, and that's not something I'm comfortable doing. Like with Amtgard, my standard, I don't think someone's taking my shots response is to drop down a single short sword and just embarrass them for like 10 minutes, right? Like fight them single against whatever combo they want for about 10 minutes and be like, okay, like I'm good enough for you to take my shots. Can I pick up my other equipment and we keep on going? Or should I just like keep on smoking you single short sword? Because like I just would prefer to like fight other people too. And it works relatively similarly for Beldag, except you get to grapple with your offhand, which is hilarious. Single blue and Beldag is probably my favorite fighting experience, because going up and like throwing shots at people's sword side and getting them to tuck in that shot on the shoulder, and then just grabbing over their hand and watching them realize that there's no way out of the situation they've just gotten themselves into. Every once in a while there was a combo that I had made up. I went to Ragnarok one year, and like I would take the shield leg and then step up, throw for sword side shoulder to get them to tuck the shield up in front of the sword, and then reach down. And as I step past for the back wrap, I would grab the edge of their shield and shunt it in the way of their return shot, and block out their shot with their own shield. And these kids watched me, like afterwards, they were just like, "What are you?" Like, I'm an Amtgarder.
I have dreamt for months about doing this.
Right. Like these are the things I've always wanted to do and can't in my game. So like, I'm going to come here to your game where we can. And it was like 2008, and Dagger here has the like standard of fighting, particularly amongst their like top tier fighters, is so much higher than it was like 13 years ago, that I feel weird telling stories about it back then, because like no one's going to have that experience anymore. Yeah. Like there's no way to go to a major DAG event and just be the best person there, because they've got a lot of very, very talented people that come over to our game and kick the stuffing out of us. Yeah, I mean, like when I went, it was 2008. Spin was there. Ed the Dread was there. Their big fighter was still, I think, kind of an up and comer. Peter the Quick. Yeah. Back when he was like mostly a DAG player and working with Spin and the Rogues and all of those guys, and like Peter the Quick and I ended up on the edge of this ditch field for like, it had to have been like an hour, where he was using Flow and I was using a spear. It was like a DAG spear, and we were pretty evenly matched, and we were just joking back and forth and trying to kill each other for like the longest time. And I mean, this is actually kind of funny because there's a follow up to that story now, which is that this past year at Keep, he and I were like one of the first matchups for the single short sword bracket. And like he beat me once, I beat him once, he beat me a second time and knocked me into losers bracket. And, went to like shake his hand or, little buddy hug, however it is at the end of the match. And I was like, hey man, like I don't know if you remember, but like Ragnarok 2008, he was like, oh my God, I do. I wasn't sure if you remembered me. And we like, we hadn't spoken in like 13 years, but, clearly both had this memorable experience with the other one, where we kind of kept that in the back of our minds for, over a dozen years. And yeah, like it's fun. I think that, I think it's interesting with LARP sports where you have, almost an assumed camaraderie with like when good fighters from Amtgard go to other games and can show that they're good fighters. They're like, everyone tries to get along, and you hear stories about that not happening, but I think most of those are like mid-tier fighters who thought they were really good and then went over in other games and were
15-year-old stories.
Yeah. And even then, though, I think a ton of it was people who were, medium-sized fish in pretty small ponds trying to go into other places, thinking that people were going to be impressed, and they weren't. So they went and like, oh, those bunch of jerks. Like, no, you were just kind of an arrogant doucher. So they didn't have a whole lot of appreciation for you, turns out. So, actually, no one in your game likes you either. Now we know.
I get asked somewhat regularly, which game has the best fighters, and I think that's kind of silly because most of the top fighters in all the games play all the other games now, and you know what I mean. And so like PTQ is a knight in multiple games. Bell down in Winter's Edge just got his Warlord, and he's a knight in DAG. But like there are a bunch of these guys who are knights in multiple games, and like, I think on average, if you pull a random 3-year-in Amtgarder and put them up against a random 3-year-in DAG Bell player, the Amtgarder is going to be quicker, but they're not going to be able to run as much. Because and so, like when I go to DAG games and there's a 4-hour-long battle game, you know what I mean? But if you put them in a tournament, most Amtgarders are going to be quicker, so they're going to have an advantage there. So it's like, which one is better? I mean, this is different skill sets. You know what I mean? Yeah. One is good here, one is good there. And the top guys go to every game. So it doesn't really matter.
Because they enjoy fighting, and where there is fighting, they will be. And I think that answer used to be more clear. And now, and you could say, I'm sure a dozen different reasons for why it is what it is. But now, a lot of the players do a lot of different things and are exposed to a lot of different things. I mean, it's almost like, mixed martial arts where, at the beginning of UFC, like there were very distinct styles, and now like anyone who wants to be competitive really has to be good at several different styles, or else they can't do anything. Like being really good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in mixed martial arts or like in UFC, like that's great, but you have to be able to strike, you have to be able to wrestle, or else there are people who are going to beat you because they know how to defend against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they know how to do these other things. And like, it's a little bit different with LARP because stick fighting is largely stick fighting, but every game does have different unique aspects to bring to it. And I mean, it used to be that Amtgard was the fastest, most technically skilled, like we were the top end. If you took our like mid-tier fighters and compared them to most other games top-tier fighters. I mean, the SCA was always kind of a weird exception, but to most other games top-end fighters, Amtgarders were destroyers. And if you took like our top-end fighters, it was like gods of the sword running around at events and essentially untouchable to the common man. And yeah, it's just not how it is anymore. And I think that's hilarious and great. So,
well, and you look at like Brett and Raven and all those guys who are on the Armored Combat League national team, and all of them got their start in Amtgard, and a lot of them are cross gaming into SCA, ACL, and a bunch of stuff. I love all the cross gaming, and I think so. When I started in 2011, there was definitely this air of you don't go play DAG, right? Like those are the bad kids, and now I think that's pretty much gone. I mean, our local groups mingle. We mingle at events. I think that for the most part, cross gaming is become a normative thing, at least in the areas that I've played.
Yeah, and I mean, I always got when I was younger, I always got this kind of like, oh, that's an Amtgarder, sort of response when I would go to things. Belagarth is like in St. Louis. Belagarth is the established, Beldag part of things. And yeah, I mean, I would go out there and, the first few times it was like, oh yeah, it's that Amtgard kid. And I would fight Flo out there and they'd be like, oh yeah, we call that the newbie mistake here. Like, well, I just killed like half of your team. So like maybe relax on that, but that's fine. But after probably about 4 times going out there, it was just I was that guy that sometimes shows up, and you kind of have to be ready to deal with me when I get there, or you're not ready to deal with me when I get there. That it was interesting in a lot of ways. SCA, I only had one guy. Now I had kind of a weird road for the SCA. Are you familiar with Turek? Okay, so he's an Amtgarder. He's from Tal Dagore. He is a hobbit and the nicest human being that I think that I've ever met. And he's been my best friend for a number of years. And his uncle is functionally the equivalent of like a 4-belted knight. It's like Pelican, Laurel, Grand Duke, Sir, And so when I showed up at the St. Louis group, their like biggest, most famous person, I could be like, oh, hey, like I'm your nephew's best friend. And so he kind of kept the other people from like being weird with me. Some people would start talking about fighting and he'd be like clearly he knows the basics of fighting. Just let him like practice and convert what he knows over into this and like move on. Like you don't have to teach this person distance control. He's been distance controlling our fights this whole time. Like it's fine. And there was one guy who had some sort of line about like, our kids fight with boffer swords. And I was like, when I was a kid, I used to stick fight. And he kind of like stopped laughing and like, okay, like, are we done now? Can we get back to like doing this thing? Because it's not, you're not special because you play this game. Like I guarantee you.
Well, I think the SCA has grown to understand how big of a recruiting force Amtgard can be for them, right? It is so bad now. There's the meme that once you get your white belt in Amtgard, you retire to the SCA, right? And so I think that some still, it's like, the foam fighting game, right? But I think a lot of them understand and realize that with spin is a big part of that. But the guys who in Anatol's cross gaming now too, and like a lot of the Amtgard warlords are able to go over there and hold their own and be really good too. And so I think that stigma's dying over there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's an aspect of a lot of like different integration problems is like just do it. The first step to integrating is interacting with the people you're talking about integrating with. And as it turns out, the more normalized you make interacting with these people, the more normal you find out that they are. Like, turns out we're all nerds who like to hit each other with sticks of various sorts, and that like that just kind of works out overall. It's fine. It tends to not be any big deal. But before you have had that Amtgarder show up at your SCA practice, or that SCA fighter show up at your Amtgard practice, like, you just kind of hear stories, and a lot of times the stories are old and they're from times when culturally we didn't mix the same way that we do now, and they're not really relevant to the modern experience anymore. So
yeah, for sure. It's one of those things. It's like, oh, well, I knew this one Amtgarder who went to SCA 10 years ago, and you're so far removed from the source at that point that it doesn't really do much. And I always tell people, each of the games have amazing things that you're going to like about them, and each of the games are going to have things you don't like about them. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. Right. For Amtgard, I love our award structure and the carrot on the stick type of stuff that comes with that. But then I also really, really enjoy the Bridge Wars style competitive battle games. I think that is super, super fun. But then when I go to DAG, I love the simplicity of the combat, of being able to just go out, grab the sticks, don't worry about people screaming at me, and just go fight. And then when I go to the SCA, I'm not as big a fan as the combat there, but I love the off the field stuff. I love the persona research. I love the historical research, and the stuff. It gives me stuff to do during the week when I'm home. And so by eating the meat, spitting out the bones, I think you can have a lot more fun compared to the I'm only going to play my single game and never look at the other game type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think also when you talk about, just the idea of like, we had an Amtgarder show up here 10 years ago, and like a significant chunk of the time when they talk about like they had this terrible experience with this Amtgarder, you can kind of like backtrack, like, okay, what was that person's name? You're like, oh, that person was banned from Amtgard at that time. That's why they showed up, is we didn't like him either. That's why he played your game, is because he wasn't allowed to play ours for like 6 months, right? And like, oh yeah, it turns out we all hate the same people. You just associate the people we kicked out with us, which is unfortunate, but like that's what happens. So, oops.
And there's something too about experiencing the culture of different games, going and like seeing the size of some of these SCA games, or seeing different way that the peerages are handled in each game has been fascinating to me. And I think that seeing DAG knighthoods in particular, but then a little bit even of some of the peerages in the SCA has influenced how I want to be a knight at Amtgard.
Got it.
And some of the structure. So for instance, like real practical example, I wish that Amtgard knights were wider in their knowledge base, similar to DAG knights. I like in most of the DAG orders, it's a completely different structure. But most of the time you're expected to be able to, if you get picked up and dropped in a new city and you're the only DAG player, that you can start a realm. So you're expected to know a base amount of garbing, a base amount of weapon construction, a base amount of recruiting, a base amount of fighting. Like you're expected to be wide, where Amtgard focuses more on tall. You're going to be an expert on one particular thing. I love the Amtgard as well. I love our knight and our award structure, but I also think that there's a really big value in our knights being wide and having a base level of knowledge in multiple areas of the game that sometimes our knights just in Amtgard don't have. And I wish that they would, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, my kind of token response to that is like, oh, that sounds exhausting. Like, I don't do like weapon construction or garbing. Like I made a set of armor. That's why I have one owl, which I'm very proud of. I like the fact that in Amtgard there's kind of a thriving like. I don't know how to describe it. Like I can go out and support people who are doing a side hustle. That I can find someone who will make good garb. I can find someone who does great weapons. And the reason that I enjoy this is that I don't have to learn how to do these things. I've tried making weapons before. It was never pretty. And garbing just intimidates me. So here we are. But at the same time, like, it probably would be for the best if I was at least able to give people some basic instructions in there to get them to the point they could start learning for themselves and do that before anyone tried to look to me.
Teach them to find the info, right? If you know how to do the research on your own, and then you can teach other, like this is something too, right? Something that you think is a super basic shot in Amtgard. That is something you mastered 15 years ago. To that new player is going to blow their mind. Right.
Correct.
And so for me, for instance, I'm just getting into garbing and I'm terrible at it. Like I would not sell any of my stuff, but to the new player who's never touched a sewing machine before, it's like, okay, I can probably teach them a little bit here. And if I don't know it, right, someone comes to me and goes, hey, Nate, hey, Godric, how do I do this thing in fighting? And then if I don't know, you're above my pay grade, let me send you to Bighead. And it's funny because, and you might not even remember this, at Keep this year, we had a new player at our park who I've actually since picked up as a page. First event he'd ever been to, only been playing for maybe 3 months, went to Keep. On the first day at Keep, he fought you one-on-one. His name was Axel or Clay for he said you spent like 30 minutes with him. It was, he goes, and he was great. He taught me all this stuff and he didn't make me feel bad. And then they told me later that he was a warlord. And I was like, what? Like you made his week, man. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I had heard that afterwards. I had heard that afterwards. I was really happy to be able to do so. It was kind of funny because he starts off, he's got I think it was like a down spear Madu like type thing. And he was like, like most people don't really want to fight me. I was like, I'll be fine. Right. Like, it's okay, and I think I was fighting him flow for a little while and then went down to single and like, okay, like let's just do this because like this is a style I'm very familiar with, so I will be okay if you do that and I do this, and I mean he was just fun to square up with, and you could tell that he was like trying to figure out how to get in with the cool kids because it was most of the serious fighters were off on that end of the field at the time. Like it was, I really, really enjoy stuff like that, to be perfectly honest. I remember being that guy. I remember being off to the side. Like I would like to fight with these people, but I have no idea how to make that happen. Overwhelmingly those of us that remember that feeling also remember like the person that was like, come over here, like come do this thing with us. And like now that I'm at the point in the game that I'm at, it's really nice to just be able to be like, I'm going to be that guy as consistently as I possibly can. And it's fun. Like it's one of my favorite aspects of the game is being able to interact with people. Like, don't get me wrong. Now being the cool kid is one of the most terrifying experiences that I as a very socially comfortable nerd can possibly have. It's also kind of weird needing to keep track of the fact that like people are going to be paying attention to what I say and paying attention to what I do. As much as I want to say that I just go and I ditch, and that's what I do. Like that's not that's not how it actually works, and that's not how it's going to be perceived, even if that's what I'm doing as much of the time as I possibly can. I've joked that the reason that I've run for like Kingdom Office as many times as I have is that what I want to do is ditch and have no interruptions to it, but that people doing that job poorly are some of the biggest interruptions to me ditching. So I'm just going to go do the job properly so that I can ditch and not be bothered by that stuff. It was fun, but I've been Kingdom GMR like 6 times, twice in the Rising Winds before Tal Dagore was a thing. And then 4 times in Tal Dagore since I started playing again. Then it was like, all right, like I'll do Kingdom Champion and then I'll go for Kingdom Monarch after that. And like the whole time, just like, no, I just want to ditch. So I need to do this so that I can ditch without people interrupting me. Well,
that is one of the things that I respect the most about you is your mentality and the way you interact with people in the field. Because I think in person, I've only interacted with you at one event, and that was Bridge Wars whatever the last one was, 2019. Yeah, 2019. And I had seen you. We share friends that are friends with, but I don't think I'd ever interacted with you before. Yeah. And I'm in FC, and we line up against you guys for Bridge Wars in the semifinals, and you were hands down the most fun person I've ever fought against. Like most encouraging, just your demeanor on the field made everybody else around you have fun. And then to hear that, or that's my encounter with you, and then to hear my newbie friend having a similar encounter with you, I respect that a lot, because there are a lot of high-end fighters in this game who are not that. And it is really, really good. You're like that. Bane, Randy is like that as well. Just some of those guys who can smoke your socks off, but are going to sit there and just laugh and cut up and have a super fun time while they're doing it. We need more of that. So props. Keep doing whatever you're doing, man.
Yeah, I have no intention of stopping. I mean, like that's again, like that's my favorite aspect of the game. I love going and goofing off. I mean, I remember joking around with the FC guys like before the fight started, and like that ended up being the most intense fighting with like the least reciprocal drama afterwards that I think I've ever been a part of. I mean, there was some, and like we could name names on not exactly what happened, but like there were a couple of people who I felt made drama for themselves. But between the two sides, there was like it was incredibly intense fighting, where everyone walked away smiling and respecting each other. I mean, you usually walk away from that. Yeah, but like usually people walk away from those sorts of things and like, oh God, like, forget that guy and this person was doing that. And, like I remember walking up to you guys beforehand, like, hey, I'm really excited to be here, and like, like knuckle bumping with everybody before going back, and then like doing that again after the game was over. Like that was amazing, and like it was a super, super entertaining time. And like that's what I live for. I like fights where I can go and have a great time with friends and then be friends afterwards, like how it's weird that there is any sort of attention to be drawn to having a good time with friends and then still getting along afterwards. Like you would think that would be a given, but like competition does things to people. And, I've competed in a lot of things at a lot of different levels. And, so overwhelming positivity is my favorite aspect of bringing to things. And it's not what I've always brought to every game, but like, I just kind of got to the point where it's like, that's the best way to do things in every game I've ever done. So like, let's just do that with all of them and go from there. Cause it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be hard.
Yep. And so some of my best friends were on your team. And then some of my best friends were on the Aaron Dawn team that we faced in the finals and ended up ultimately losing to. And at the end of both of those fights, when we won and when we lost, still gave hugs, still loved the people I was fighting with. Like, I think that and it is getting better, I think. But for a while there in Amtgard, it was your friends are only allowed to wear your colors, and anyone not in your colors are not your friends.
Correct.
And like, that's silly to me. That is just, it's nonsense. It's some of the most fun I have ever had are fighting with my best friends on the other side of the line from me. Like that's so much fun.
Yeah, if someone's gonna bring that guy down, it's gonna be me. And you side in, and outplaying your friends or them outplaying you and like shutting you down in a particularly nice way. Like those are great moments. And yeah, like I'm glad that it is how it is. You are absolutely right that was not it. I was at Bridge Wars a number of years ago where the fight started getting super intense, and I was on Grendel team or SI team or something like that. Conrad was there, and he was kind of the main guy on our team, and we're going up against the Dragon Hounds with Onyx, and we all kind of realized that like
way back here.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So so we all kind of got together and discussed beforehand that like the previous fight had been way too drama filled, way too much bad blood, and that neither team really cared. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it as goofy as we possibly could. And we decided that my team, either like I think it was Grendel's with Conrad being the spokesperson, that my team was going to be pirates and the Dragon Hounds were going to be ninjas, and we're going to do it as a Pokemon battle, right? We're all just going to goof off. We're going to do like dumb stuff, right? So we go out and Leon gets called, and Conrad and Onyx are the first ones that walk out, and Onyx like puts a bandana over his face and is like, "You can't see me," you know, and like Conrad's spinning in circles looking for Onyx and gets stabbed in the back. And then we decided that for the Pokemon battle, whoever won would call dead, and we would just send out 2 new people, and like this is how we're gonna, you know, we were essentially the entertainment was the idea behind it. So of course Conrad gets killed by Onyx, and Onyx decides we're at the Fallen Rock bridge, right? When Bridge Wars is on an actual physical bridge. And so so he sits down on the bridge and like slides under the railing, and as he lands, his foot hits a rock wrong and he spiral fractures his shin. Right. So like we're all kind of sitting around like, I mean, it's the most serious injury most of us have ever seen in person. I mean, like Rick was in a bad way.
I've heard stories about that injury.
Yeah, but we're all sitting there like we were like, but this was the goof off round. Like, how did this happen? Yeah, like the goof off round ended up being canceled due to injury, and then we went back into fighting after that. It was wild. Yeah, I mean, it was those were interesting times. You know, very very different culturally, but like there was still that element of goofiness and appreciation of not taking things too terribly seriously back then. This one just happened to end in a hospital visit.
Well, and if you're not having fun and the people across the field from you aren't having fun, something is not going correctly. Like go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. Is like I'm one of the most competitive people that I know, but I think that a lot of people who characterize themselves as such are really saying that they are obsessed with winning. And to me, being competitive and being obsessed with winning are 2 very, very different things. I enjoy competition for the sake of competition. I like pitting myself against other people at various things and finding out how I stack up against them. And it's just, I don't care who wins. I enjoy just the aspect of the interaction of competition. And there are definitely people out there that are obsessed with winning, where they have essentially internally said that winning is their fun, right? And if they're not winning, they're not having fun. And if they're not having fun, why should the other person have fun? And if their fun requires the other person not having fun, then that's just what has to happen, because we can't both win. And if I substitute mentally winning for fun, you can't have fun while I'm winning anyway, and I'm not going to lose. And it leads into this weird downward spiral of people just trying to screw over the other guy as quickly as possible, because that's the only way that I can get my little shot of dopamine at the end of the day. Is when game gets called, I have a slightly higher score than you do. And since that's the only way I can feel good about myself, you have to feel bad about yourself. And I'm okay with you feeling bad, because I don't think there's any way for us both to feel good at the end of it. And that is something I've seen in a lot of people. I mean, you know, at different times, there have been whole companies built around that concept. And I won't go into naming names, but I'm sure everyone in every game has at least a couple of examples they can think of people who are obsessed with winning, that form a group, and that group tends to make it less fun for the people around them, because their win is the only thing that they can concentrate on. And that's the important thing. And I have zero tolerance for that. You know, I don't care what the scoreboard is at the end of the day. I mean, I used to joke that the reason I started getting better at tournament fighting was because I like fighting, so I may as well like not lose. Because if I lose, I have to stop. Right. So, you know, and that was like kind of the joke that I had going for a while. And, you know, eventually I ended up like winning a few kingdom level tournaments, and then they changed the rules and now I'm a warlord. And it's like, okay, like, you know, like it dreams can come true, especially when it's not even a particularly active dream that you have. It just kind of happens along the way. You know, and I mean, I get kind of a weird ADHD transition through it all, but, you know, I had actually like not in any way intended to shoot for Warlord up until I really started hitting my stride as a fighter a couple of years back. And I was like, all right, like what I'm going to do is I'm going to like double down. I'm going to get in better shape. I'm going to fight more. I'm really going to concentrate on this. And then like through spring and summer, I'm going to hit as many tournaments as I can at like the local kingdoms, you know, both Tal Dagore and Rising Winds. There's Polaris, Rivermore. Like they've all got tournaments not too terribly far from me. And of course, that was the spring of 2020 that I was talking about, which kind of pooped in my Wheaties as hard as it possibly could. You know, but it was like February of 2020, just before everything shut down for the pandemic. I went up to an RW tournament. It was your guys' quals. And I was watching people, you know, getting ready to fight. And I was like, all right, like I can do this. I can win this. And Bino shows up and I was like, I can get second, right? Yeah. Like second is fine. It's good. A little bit far to drive for second place, but there's a day event tomorrow, so I'll get over it.
My Squire was fighting in that tournament, and so you showed up and he was like, okay, I've got this. And then he's like, oh, okay, Bighead's here. So, okay, maybe I can get second. And then he's like, oh, Bino's here. Okay, maybe I can get third. You know?
Right. You know, and you know, like, all right, you know, like realistic expectations here, you know, and it's fun. It's, you know, and so the week after that I won at Tal Dagore, and that was my second Kingdom win. And I was pretty stoked about that. And then RW's first tournament out of quarantine, I'd stayed sharp enough off of sparring. It was Ferrix moved to St. Louis, and he and I fight pretty regularly. And he's an absolutely fantastic guy. I'm not sure if you've had the pleasure or not, but he is an amazing fighter and an amazing dude, and just has an absolutely fantastic personality and energy that he brings into everything that he does. And yeah, so we would fight, and we would fight seriously for a little bit, and then we just both goof off, and we both have that kind of streak of like, okay, now we're doing this because it's fun, and it doesn't matter what we're working on right now. Like we're just going to enjoy fighting each other. Anyway, so I go to RW after that one, end up picking up the win at the first tournament as it reopens. And then like a month later, they were like, yeah, only 3 Kingdom wins are necessary. And I'm like, I think I just got Warlord during a meeting, you know, like that's not how I expected this to go down. You know, and I called Ferrix. I was, we'll say reasonably emotional. This is a weird couple of minutes for me. But Ferrix had actually won 4 Kingdom tournaments, but refused an award for one of them because he was kind of drinking the toxic fighter mentality Kool-Aid earlier on in his career. So I had actually, as Monarch, called him up about a month prior to that and just told him like, hey, like, I know this is kind of weird, but you've won 4 Kingdom level tournaments. I am super willing to stand by giving you Warlord because you've earned Warlord and you are a Warlord caliber fighter, and no one's ever going to come to me and be like, why would you give that guy Warlord? Like, you obviously are one. And he and I talked for a couple minutes, and he kind of came down to like, look, I appreciate this, but I want to win that last one. You know, like I've kind of had it as a goal. You know, it had been, I think, like a year since he had won the previous 1.5 years because of COVID. He was like, I've got that as my goal, and I'm gonna do it. And I appreciate what you're doing, but like, I really want that. So I called him up and I was like, Ben, there's only 3 now. Ben, there's 3, right? You know, I kind of sputter out that they had changed the standards for it. And, told him that, you know, like I obviously the offer is on the table again. He's like, all right, you know what, if they're changing the standards, I'll take it for 3. Then there was that mini fiasco. I don't think it lasted more than about half an hour, but where they thought that the rules weren't going to go in effect for another like 30 days. So I had to call him back up and be like, Ben, not yet. You know, like I had I think like 3 weeks left in my term as Monarch.
Okay.
When this happened. Right. So I'm like, okay, like I can't give you the award now, because it doesn't go into effect for 30 days unless you take it back and you say that you will let me give you Warlord for the previous tournament. And he was like, no, I'm gonna stick to my guns. You know, like I'll wait for the 30 days. And I was like, fine, you know, and then I found out that was not the case, that they were going to effect right away. And I was like, Ben, unless you tell me no right now, I'm giving you your Warlord at my end reign. Like, I don't care anymore. Right. We're done talking about this. And he was like, It's fine.
Roller coaster.
It was fun. It was a good time. And then I got my own at Keep and got like the single best award that's ever been given at Amtgard, that like Sashimono banner with all three of the like masterhood level awards that I end up picking up in one fell swoop. And I mean, that was funny because one of them they invented while I was Monarch. Another one they changed the standards for while I was Monarch, and the third one I unequivocally earned with my term as Monarch. So I ended up earning three of them at the same time after being in the game for like 16 years or something like that, and like, okay, well, that's weird. And then, oddly for me also, with Crown having been redone like 2 years prior to that, I'm not qualified for any awards because Battlemaster doesn't exist. I'd only done 2 kingdom level offices that would have picked me up crown points, even hypothetically, and like Warlord had different award standards. So like all of that kind of lined up in this really weird way that like I definitely had a couple of strong shots of imposter syndrome before deciding I don't care, it's a game. And I mean, if people want to take any sort of issue with any of those awards, they can talk to me about it, or like we can be on the ditch field together and you can see what I do. And I mean, I'm sure there's people who are not warlords who are going to say that I shouldn't be a warlord who can beat me. Okay, like congratulations. I'm sure
that's been the case with every warlord ever.
Correct. And that's what it comes down to is like, okay, so how many warlords are there that you can't beat reasonably well? If we reserve Warlord for the top 10 fighters in the game, we're going to have a bad time getting people there. And different people can talk about what they want with, well, where should the line be? But the line only moved by like inches, right? And if you've won 3 kingdom level tournaments, the odds of you winning a 4th are high, right? And what I really love about the award standardization they did was that the path from 1 to 7 is so much smoother than it was, a year ago, 3 months ago, whenever they went over that. Because it used to be like the jump between like 3 or 4 and 5 was just massive, right? Like everyone's got 1 through 3, and then there's like 5,
and then once you have to get to a barony or a duchy or whatever your kingdom has it as.
Yeah, well, once you stop getting off of field prowess was so much of it, right? And then so now you've got like 5 through 6, right? You can place at your local kingdom, or you can like win like duchy level tournaments and streak through duchy level tournaments. Then it goes up there, and then like actually winning the tournaments is this whole other gulf. So I don't feel like it changed dramatically as far as like the end of the game between getting 3 and getting 4, but like, man, the ability to pick it up off of wins instead of streaks for like 5, 6, and 7 is such a big deal. Because like 5 was always the odd man out before, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, so like, yeah, you can get like 3rd in a kingdom level tournament, but you kind of have to streak for 5, right? Like if you're at 4, the odds of you getting 3rd in a kingdom level tournament before you streak at some barony for like 18 is relatively low, unless you just don't go to barony level tournaments, in which case I guess is a whole separate thing. But yeah, like it's an odd thing. And then I think it's also super frustrating where it's like, if you're shooting for that and you pick up 2nd and like, oh man, like, now I get my 5th for getting a 2nd, then I have to get 2nd again or 1st for a 6th. And like, it was all a mess. And now it's like, no, like you can kind of just stair step your way on through. One of the things I'm super excited about, honestly, with all of this stuff, because I think this is hilarious, is the concept of how we're going to apply battlefield prowess for Orders of the Warrior now that Orders of Battle are specifically for battlefield prowess. I think that's going to be a whole lot of fun.
I think it'll be battlefield prowess for the Warrior is how do you do on the ditch field?
Right. But I also, because I think it's hilarious, really, really want to push for giving people orders of battle for what they do on the ditch field. I want to see Battlemasters off of ditching just to make the old guard super upset about what's going on.
I feel like that's a good enough reason to do most things in this game.
Yes,
you know it.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that there's a level of overlap there that, we have with other awards too. Like, what if there's a barony level PM that does an exceptional job? Well, do you give them another order of the crown? Sure. Do you give them a rose for service to the game? Maybe. Do you give them the lion for leadership outside of, the actual requirements of office? What do you do with that? And I think it's absolutely okay to see a little bit of that within like the fighting path, that now it's like, okay, so like this person just killed 9 people in a row from the front on a ditch field. Like, what do you call that? They've got 2 orders of battle and an order of the warrior. What do you do for that? That's all super exciting for me. I'm really excited to see those discussions happen and just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
For me, there were 2 major changes in all of this that I think are important. The first of which I really like the changes, like you were saying, lower down the ladder, because I'm a 5th order. I've been at a 5th since like 2016, and the gap between where I am skill wise to placing in Kingdom level tournament is massive. You know what I mean? And so now I feel like that 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7 is actually manageable.
Yes.
And it's not go from winning your Podunk Barony tournament to placing at Kingdom. There's actually some middle ground there, which was needed.
Yes, absolutely. And because like the fact of the matter is, I've seen people talk about, well, what would you recommend to someone starting out, who wants to be a warlord? Like, what would you tell them? And like, I feel weird about it because like, I feel like the best advice I can give is like, don't, right? Like don't focus on the award at the end, because for fighting more so than anything else, it's so dependent on, what you call the meta, right? That you can be an absolutely fantastic fighter, but if you have to fight through certain people, you're not going to be there for years if you ever get there. So, like it's actually an old spin quote talking about, I didn't set out to be a warlord. I set out to get as good at fighting as I could, and I happened to warlord along the way. What I would really suggest is that you just work on fighting in an enjoyable atmosphere. And when you get to the point that you're kind of looking around at a kingdom, either that you're in or nearby, and going, I think I can start placing in that. Then you start like once you've gotten to that point that the meta is starting to line up for you, then you can start pushing and concentrating and actually setting goals. But like, just enjoy yourself as much as possible in the hobby that you do on your weekends, instead of making that like part of your self-image and then getting very upset when that doesn't line up with how real life turns out. Because I think there are a lot of people, I mean, you see it all the time where they go, I'm going to be a warlord, and they work super hard, and they should be genuinely proud of the effort that they put in. But because of where they're at, or because of things that are outside of their control that don't have to do with their effort, it doesn't end up working out, right? And instead of being very happy with the effort that they put in, they get frustrated. And a lot of times they quit, because what's the point in doing this if I can't achieve what I'm trying to do? And if you don't set that hard goal for yourself in that stage, you can just enjoy that stage. And if you never get to the next stage, like, that's fine. Most people don't, and that needs to absolutely be okay. But people get this level of burnout, this level of frustration associated with plateauing, that like sometimes plateaus can be overcome and sometimes they can't. Sometimes that's as good as you're going to get in certain aspects. I like talking about fighting. I like talking about getting better at things in general, and talking about getting better at fighting things is absolutely fantastic. And I think that a lot of what happens with fighting is that you really have two options when you're trying to get better. That you can try to smooth out the things you're bad at, or you can try to get even better the things you excel at. And I decided not long after I came back into the game, I took like a 5-year break, that I wanted to not ever work on getting better at the things that I was bad at. Right.
Fair.
Because that's super frustrating. And I just wanted to have a good time. And if I could enjoy myself, that it didn't really matter whether I was the best fighter I could possibly be, because I would be enjoying what I was doing. So what I enjoy doing is I enjoy distance fighting. I enjoy inventive shots and faking people out. Like this is what I get my kicks out of when I'm fighting. And so I just worked on that. Like I made up new shots. I figured out how to apply what I could already do in newer and better ways. And I got a very, very fine, I always had kind of a very fine tuned sense of distance control. That's a whole separate issue. But I learned how to apply that and how to weaponize that. And the nice thing for me, I get there's like an asterisk to this whole conversation, is that like I'm about 6'4", and I've got the arm span of like a 6'6" individual. And people consider it to be very frustrating fighting, some evolutionary missing link between humans and orangutans when they're fighting me. But the fact of the matter is that if you have more reach than the other person, distance control is both an offensive and a defensive measure. And so when I picked one thing to excel at, I was picking one thing that I could apply to like 99% of the situations that I would get into. Like having said that, I think a lot of mistakes that tall fighters make is that they don't work on kind of plan B, right? Where, as a tall fighter, the inherent and assumed advantage that you have is that you are able to attack the person from outside of the range at which they can attack you, right? And tall fighters say, well, if I can just stay at this range, right, I don't need to worry about the rest of it, right? Like that's the important thing here, is that I can just win, right? Like I just mash that button there and I win. And then they come across people who have seen people mash that button before, and they go, okay, like we're blocking and we're closing, and oh, there we go. And you have shorter fighters who are used to fighting at a height and a reach disadvantage, who are just like, okay, buddy, like do you have something else to bring to the table? And like, as the taller fighter, you need to know how to disengage, because if you just like the idea is what it really boils down to is that the taller fighter has the ability to dictate the terms of the fight at the outset. But a fighter who excels at and is dedicated to closing is going to be able to dictate the terms of the engagement for anything past the outset, right? So the taller fighter gets the first shot, and then the shorter fighter, the one that has solid defense while closing, controls every other aspect of the fight. So if the taller fighter doesn't have a way of disengaging and resetting that, then you're acknowledging that you either win in the first shot or overwhelmingly you lose. And I think I see that happen with a lot of tall fighters, where people will say like, yeah, like that guy has really great striking, but like, boy, do they crumple when you get up close. I think everywhere has an example of that there is people talk about like the 3-shot lefty, right? One trick pony type things. And like, I think there is like the single strike tall fighter that if they don't beat you in the first one, you're gonna beat them. Like get really good at throwing that first shot and get really good at regaining the tempo of that fight, or at least disrupting your opponent's tempo, or else you're just gonna die a lot.
The most annoying fighters that I've ever fought in this game are tall, lanky people who are faster than me at backpedaling. And it's like, what do you do? Like they hit me from further away. They've got the range control and can back out of anything they're not interested in fighting in. And like, I just get so frustrated about it. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah. So much of that is a lot of the answer is, well, you try to bait them into block strike and stuff like that, like go for the arms while they're coming out, and like there are answers to that that involve putting them at a disadvantage that isn't a distance disadvantage, but like that's why so much of what I do is like, okay, so now the person is able to swing at me, I'm going to do this and duck out. We're gonna reset, because the best thing my opponent can do at this point is block strike. So I never want to get into a block strike situation. I'm not, secrets out. Like, I'm not actually good at block strike. I consider myself to be objectively bad at it. I will fight lower mid-tier fighters and get involved in block strike with them and just lose and be like, yeah, well, oops. Right. So yeah, like that's like there's always going to be that little like counterpoint type thing. But yeah, being the shorter, slower fighter is absolutely one of those, like you've only got some very specific things to start mashing on, and you better hope that those work.
Your defense, it better be pretty good, Skippy. So the first, like I said, the first thing I think the Warlord changes is that 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7.
Yes.
The second thing that I think it changes, and I want to get your opinion on. So like you said, the majority of people who already have 3 realistically are going to get 4, 5, 6. Like they're going to get more wins. Yeah. I think there are some outliers though, who are old and broken, who were almost there in the past, who are getting it. And for me, I'm biased because I have a bunch of friends that fall into that category. But there are some people that are just throwing a fit, like just massive about that guy's not Warlord caliber. Well, he may have been 10 or 15 years ago and got to 3. And how do you feel about the retroactive Warlords for old and broken fighters?
Yes. Okay. So one of the advantages that I have here is that the friends that you're talking about having are overwhelmingly friends of mine from years and years ago. Like RW is going to have a big court at Bridge Wars, and I am excited about it. So, and a lot of people are getting retroactively caught up. I think that I always enjoy retroactively catching up on awards. And I think that Orders of the Crown really showed like how that is necessary, right? Because you look at, if we're going to start actually appreciating the work that GMRs are doing, the work that board of directors members are doing, that saying like, hey, everyone who's done this for 15 years up until this point, like we appreciate that. Here's your first for your term that you're in would be gross, right? Like no one wants to do that. So when you start from a mindset of this person would have had it years ago, if it had been around years ago, that things like retroactively adding in Warlords is important. The fact is that a lot of the people that you're talking about were winning these tournaments when tournament wins didn't matter, right? Like if you didn't streak 21, you didn't get it. So sad, go read the rules. It's also I'm not sure exactly how.
Real quick, I'm gonna pause you. Explain for viewers who weren't around back then the difference from that cultural era between winning and streaking. For someone who's never heard, what do you mean streaking? Like,
okay. Yeah, so this is fascinating because this is an aspect of the culture that changed a lot while I wasn't playing, and it's really, really nifty to see people not understand how it used to be. Okay, so it used to be that you only got Orders of the Warrior through streaking tournament wins, right? So you could get your first Order of the Warrior for winning 3 rounds in a row in a tournament, second for 5, third for 7, so on, odd numbers until you get to 10 at 21. But you had
21 in a row.
21 in a row. Yeah. 0 L's, 21 in a row. So what's fascinating about this is a couple fold, right? So one is, of course, you had to hit at the appropriate park levels, right? So you could not streak for your 6th Order of the Warrior at a barony level tournament, right? You had to be at a duchy to get 6 or 7, or a kingdom tournament to get 6 or 7. But the tournaments were set up in such a way to make this actually feasible, right? I mean, everything was bracketed, right? We didn't do Iron Man to figure it out. We didn't do pools. There was no Warlord sports style. There was no, or Warlord style, because we don't do Warlord sports style anymore. That would be bad. There was no Warlord style. There was no Hog Cup style. It was just like you bracketed, and
you had 60 people in that tournament. You're bracketed 64 people.
Here we go. You guys get your buys, and we're moving on to the next round. And what was interesting about it is that you had all these same controversies back then, because you would have people that would enter like, okay, so I entered Sword and Board and Florentine and Open, right? And I had 5 fights each in each of them, but since I was pretty confident, I ended up picking up a streak of like 15 at this tournament. And then you'd have to like not fight at tournaments until you came across another tournament scene you thought that you could pick more up at, and they'd be like, okay, like let me do this category and this category, and like, oh yeah, I just streaked like 19 or 21, and like that was how people put them together.
Oh, and your streaks could carry over from one tournament to another.
Yes. So they would carry over from one tournament to another, but you heard stories about people that like only entered polearm, right? Like, so they're either going to win like 5 polearm tournament categories in a row, or they're not streaking for Warlord, right? Like there's no way to do that. And like, that was just how things were. So you couldn't just win a tournament to get Warlord. You had to dominate a tournament to get Warlord. And if we're being frank, a lot of that meant you're probably going to cheat pretty hard to get through that. Not exclusively, right? There are a lot of great fighters from back then. But the difficulty is when you are a great honest fighter and you go against a great dirty fighter, and you have to beat that person like 6 times in a row to get Warlord. You can either roll RNG and really hope that the numbers come up your way enough to get this, or you figure out either ways of preventing them from cheating, or you start lowering your standards yourself, right? I mean, like, there's only so many ways of doing it. You either don't get it, you find a way of adjusting your opponent to get it, you find a way of adjusting you to get it. And that's what it comes down to.
There was big controversy sometimes. It's like, oh, you're 19, 20, 21 all happen to be your company bros.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that was a big thing back then too.
Yeah. And at a certain point, you also sort of look there and be like, okay, so what were like 0 or what were 1 through 18, right? Like I didn't start at 19 and win 3 fights in a row and hit 21. But yeah, you absolutely had these sorts of things going on, and you had people, like, yeah, this person came out of this tournament with a streak of 17, and the next tournament, some Warlord flies out of Texas, and like, nope, not gonna happen here. Yep. You're not getting shit in this tournament, kid. And through stick skill or from what we talked about earlier, like that becomes really difficult. If someone is dedicated to you not streaking through this category, they can probably make it happen.
It's funny because it used to be the Warlords would fly out to block, and then when they did it to tournament wins and you had to have a Warlord present for the they just stopped showing up. It's like the complete opposite happened. It's like, nah, it used to be, if we don't want you to get it, we're going to come and stop you. Now, if we don't want you to get it, we're just not going to show up.
Yeah. And God, like all of that is super, super near and dear to my heart, because I like St. Louis is where like Path of the Dragon really kicked off. I'm in St. Charles, which is like 20 minutes north of St. Louis, basically. But that's like Tisco and Ferrix and Karai and Banshee, and it's several other people, who were all part of that group. But for a while, they were all like living in an apartment that they called the House of Wax, and just fighting together. And they were like paying Warlords gas money, where they were like, if you drive down here, we'll feed you twice and pay your gas money to get here and back. And they did all this stuff, and they all tried super hard, and they all got super good. But they all had this reverence for warlords and for fighting culture that I think did several of them major disservices, if not all of the major disservices at different points. And I'm reasonably good friends with most of them, and these are discussions that I either am very happy to have with them face to face or have had with them face to face. In fact, some of my earliest conversations with them when they were all up and coming fighters was like, you guys need to like not do what you're doing because this is unhealthy. It's interesting though that a lot of them came out of that with views that were drinking 100% that whole like you have to beat warlords to become a warlord, and like guys, like if there's no one in your area, man, just be the best in your area, and that's what warlord actually comes down to is
100%.
is being the best in your area. And if no one comes to you to stop you from being the best in your area, like this is just what you are. I'm sorry, and then now you are the bar to set for other people. And if you're worried about your appearance as that bar, like work on getting better, but like don't get weird about this award because it doesn't have to be weird and you're making it weird. It's kind of a fun, fascinating thing. I mean, going back to the actual question you were asking about, like, these people that got it, got along this path back in the day. I mean, if you won 3 tournaments back in the day, when people were traveling all around to stop people from streaking and things like that, you were a badass. And there's not a whole lot of getting around that. And if you are in a tournament, if you won 3 of those tournaments with people coming in to stop people from streaking, stop people from doing things, like you had a level of competency that exceeds the minimum bar of warlord. And I think that there are several people now that make great aging warlords, and maybe that's not the nicest term, but it's not inaccurate. Where, I mean, like I'll bring up Hades as an example. Like Hades is one of the best, has some of the best technical knowledge about Amtgard fighting of anyone that I've ever run across. I love talking to Justin about fighting, and he knows his stuff. His body doesn't let him do the stuff anymore. But like back in the day, Hades put people in the dirt, and he was really, really good at what he did. And to this day,
teach it. He can still teach it.
And to this day, he can still talk about it. And I mean, like that guy knows more about fighting than I do. Right? There's no getting around it.
He has forgotten more about fighting than I have ever known.
Yeah, he's gone up against a lot of people with a lot of different styles in a lot of different places. And I always loved fighting Justin back in the day. He was always very, very fun, very, very talented. He's been a friend of mine for a long time for several different reasons, but like it does not hurt at all that we have always respected the hell out of each other on the field. So when people talk about, retroactively applying awards, like Justin should have been a warlord a decade and a half ago. Like if these standards had been applied, Justin would have been a warlord a long time ago, and he would have been a very respected warlord for a long time. And he would have been someone that could teach at SKBC and teach convincingly at SKBC, and no one would have batted an eye when he started talking about it. So like these are the people that I'm going to think of when they talk about retroactively adding awards. It's going to be people like Justin. It's going to be people like Juicy. Juicy used to kick my ass up and down the field, and we kind of got to the point just before I stopped playing where we were pretty evenly matched. But like I'll always remember squaring up with Juicy on battle games where he's wearing like Brigandine or something like that. I'm like, oh no, I don't like what's about to happen. I can't stop it. Like that was just how real life was back then. And if you had told me then, like, yeah, Juice is a warlord, I'd have been like, okay, yeah, right. And that would have been the end of the conversation. A big part of what I've talked about with this, like not necessarily the retroactively applying it, but kind of the meaning of warlord in general is that out of everything in Amtgard, I feel like warlord is the title that has the least intrinsic value, because people largely don't care if you're a warlord. Like there are definitely people that do, right? But at the end of the day, when people are trying to find people that they want to fight against, they aren't going on the orc, and they're not tracking down like who has this title that I can learn from. They're going to the ditch field and they're finding people who are slaying, and they're going up to those people and they're lining up against them and they're asking, hey, can you come off to the side and teach me some stuff. And you're finding the slayers. And there are a lot of people out there who are slayers that are not warlords. And there are a lot of people out there who are warlords who are not slayers, right? I mean, maybe a lot of is not the right term, but I've definitely met a few where you're like, okay, like, I get that you have this title. I don't care though. Like that doesn't matter to me. If you aren't showing me stuff that I want to be either honing myself against or learning from, it doesn't matter to me that you've got the little phoenix hanging from your belt where it's gold and red, and you get to celebrate that. I think that's one of the things that people lose sight of, especially when talking about like the should Battlemaster count for sword belt or not debate, is like largely no one cares if you're a warlord, right? Like are you putting it down on the field or are you not? And if you are, who cares? And a lot of these guys are gonna get their feathers in their caps from things that they did years ago, but they were just slayers years ago, and they are people who can teach you today how to be a slayer if you put in the time and the effort with them. And yeah, like that's that's where so much of it comes down to for me is I have never like looked someone up on the orc to find out if they're a warlord or not.
You can just tell, or you don't care because they can teach you either way.
Yeah, and you can tell, and sometimes you're wrong, right? I mean, like I've absolutely met people. I'm like, oh, that guy's got to be a warlord. I'm like, no, I've got 6. And you're like, you will be soon. Who's in your kingdom?
Yeah.
You kind of go through there, but again, it's the title doesn't matter in the fight. You either are putting it down or you aren't. And like the people that I'm hearing are going to be getting it at Rising Winds. It's like, yeah, like all these guys at different points in my experience in Amtgard have just whooped the dog piss out of me. And these are people that at different times had someone said that person is a warlord. I've been like, yeah, okay. That's the end of the conversation.
I think a big to realize here is the culture has changed and has shifted away from you have to have warlords at the tournament for it to count. If that was still the culture, I could understand not wanting old warlords, because that then dilutes, right? All these tournaments are now going to count when they shouldn't, because these guys aren't good enough. But in a world where these tournaments don't have, like, the tournaments are counting whether there's a warlord or not, in at least in the Rising Winds and in the areas that I've fought in. And so if the tournament's going to count whether there's a warlord there or not, it doesn't matter if an old and broken warlord decides he wants to pick up a stick and fight, because the tournament's going to count whether they're there or not.
Right. And I would love to see, some of the old and broken warlords hop in on tournaments and just, kind of ride that out. Like, who cares? But I always thought it was silly when it was, like it only counts if there's a warlord there. And I know that a lot of that is my perspective from Tal Dagore, where, for a long time we had 2 warlords, and that's Wildcat and Wilhelm, Sir Wildcat and Sir Wilhelm, if we want to get all super technical about it. Both phenomenal fighters, but both of them also people that like have real life that goes on. And, Wilhelm, I see on the ditch field, not super regularly from being from the same park. But I don't remember the last time that he made it to a tournament. And Wildcat, I see even less. And it's been, I think, even longer since he's been in a tournament. And it kind of gets to the point where it's like, yeah, like Tal Dagore has 2 warlords, but if we only apply you have to have a warlord here for it to count, then we don't have kingdom level tournaments that count. And I know Rising Winds had kind of a similar thing for a while, where there were a couple of warlords from the area, but not ones that were actively participating in tournaments. So yeah, like you either completely discount kingdom level tournaments for awards, or you find another way of doing it.
I mean, there were 3 to 5 years in the Rising Winds where those tournaments didn't count for anything. They were wins, but they weren't sufficient competition wins, and luckily that has changed. But when I was coming up, I remember first really starting in Kingdom tournaments like 2014 to 2017 ish. In those years, if there wasn't a warlord there, it was like you might as well go home, because it doesn't matter if you don't win. Or even if you do win, there's no warlord here, so what's it matter? That was the mentality. And then we got to the point, so there are 4 warlords at that point in the history of the kingdom. And so Marcosius retired, Tugin moved to Texas, Raven moved to Texas, and Bane was on and off again attendance wise. And so if the one tournament Randy would show up to a year counted, and then all the other ones were like, there's no warlord here, there's no need to fight. And that sucked. That sucked.
And what's silly is when you get to the point where, like not saying that this happened with Randy, I wasn't there for those tournaments, but when Randy does show up at those tournaments and he's not at the caliber that he was before, and it's like, well, we waited for someone to show up who's not sufficient competition anymore. Like, what do you do at that point? And that's, so again, like going back to the point, like either there's slayers at the tournament or there aren't. And Rising Winds has never had a paucity of slayers. There have always been people who were dangers to warlords on any given field. It didn't matter if it was battle games or ditch field or a tournament. So why wait for someone with a title to show up to let you earn the title? And with Tal Dagore, I mean, it was like, well, like we've got a handful of good fighters of the kingdom, so as long as 2 of them show up, whoever's better gets it. We had like an 8-person tournament one time because it was super, super snowy, but like 3 of us showed up who were normally tournament contenders, and it was like, yep, like this is sufficient competition. Don't care. Now, what year did you guys become a kingdom? Oh, hell if I know. We were on a push. I think it was like 2009, 2010.
Okay, I was gonna say, so you got 2, and then you and you said Fezzik, so 4.
Ferrix,
Ferrix, sorry. 4 in 12 years, call it.
Something like that,
I thought it was crazy. Rising Winds had 4 in like 20 years. And
well,
holy cow.
Yeah. And so much of that was Tugin being such a dominant force in tournaments for such a long time. One of our warlords, Wildcat, moved up from Texas, and he was going to tournaments and he had like 9 Orders of the Warriors trying to warlord in RW with Tugin being here. And again, it was like, even if he won a tournament, he had to flawlessly dominate the tournament, and it's really difficult to do. Now I going back a bit, like I do think it's kind of funny where we still have, even in the rule book, the whole like streaking to 21 thing, because now to streak an entire tournament, you pick up like 15 wins, right? like you go through and you beat everyone in the tournament. You pick up 15 wins at kingdom level. So you have to win like a tournament and a half in a row for you to streak 21 anymore.
For what he's talking about, if for the viewer who might not be familiar, most of kingdom tournaments now start with an Ironman bracket where everyone goes in 1 to 3 lines. You fight with 60 people, and then the top 8, 12, they cut it down into smaller brackets, then get into the bracket. So where it used to be, everyone was bracketed. So you could, if you were trying to streak, theoretically, you get 3-5 wins off of the bad kids, and that counted towards your streak. And then you got into the real competition further up the bracket. Well, now the brackets are only the top 8. And so if you're getting into the top 8 of your kingdom you're cutting away 8 out of 60, 8 out of 40, like you have much fewer options. And then those that you are bracketing against are the good people now. And so it's a completely different environment.
Yeah. I mean, each and every fight is worth considering when you get into the brackets of any kingdom level tournament. With very few exceptions. I mean, every once in a while, some formatting thing comes up, and like, okay, well, we had a tournament in Tal Dagore some time back where we did M-Hog, or like Hog Cup style, and we had a Florentine pool that was just ridiculous, where there were like 6 or 7 people that day that could have been contenders for Florentine category, and all of them but one were in one pool. And like it started off, and it was like, this one good fighter's name gets called, or number gets called, and he starts walking up, and I mean, everyone's sort of like, don't want to be in that pool, right? And then like, I think I was the second one I got called, and I was like, well, I'm in that pool. And then another fantastic fighter's name got called. I'm like, oh no. And there were like 5 of us in one pool. We're all just staring at each other, like kind of giggling to ourselves, because there were going to be people that would normally be contenders to win the bracket, to win the category, who were not going to make it into the brackets. There were going to be like 3 or 4 of them that just stopped. And that's what happened. It was a lot of fun. We joked about that. It was like murder flow pools, like 2018 or something like that. We're like, yeah, like there's no good thing here.
We could do a whole show on pros and cons of different tournament formats like that.
For sure. Yeah.
But we are about an hour and 40 minutes in. So I'm gonna move to some of our wrap up questions, and I'm gonna throw one to you that's kind of fun, but I'm pretty interested too. So you get Warlord and Battlemaster here. You're the first one I've asked with Battlemaster on this, so I'm interested. Okay, two different ones. You are building a Mount Rushmore. Top 4 Warlords, top 4 Battlemasters. This can be however you want to interpret it, right? This can be most influential. This can be best, however you want to interpret it. Who are you putting on your Mount Rushmore for Warlords, and who are you putting on Mount Rushmore for Battlemasters? Okay.
So I've actually given this one consideration since you had it in your outline at the beginning. I didn't think of one for Battlemaster, so I'm going to have to think on the fly on that one. But Warlord I had semi-prepared for. So the fact of the matter is, for me, it's going to be people that had the most influence or who have impressed me the most. And I would say that, looking for 4 spots. So as awkward as it is to say out loud, person number 1 is Spin. Like he kind of redefined how Florentine works for LARPing, and having interacted with the person a number of times personally, I'll leave it at the professional level and just say he's a very, very talented flow fighter, and really did readjust how Florentine would be viewed by Amtgarders moving forward. I mean, essentially he is rogue method, and all that implies. So that would be person number 1. Now we're going to get into the fun ones. So person number 2 is someone that most people probably are not familiar with, but was a guy named Big Zig. Now, Big Zig was a Celestial Kingdom warlord back in the day. He was definitely a Texas warlord. I only met him at one event, but the dude was like 6'5" and just like lanky tall person, right? And had this style of fighting that really opened my eyes to how to just hammer reach advantage, like not just use it, but weaponize it to such a comical degree that the other person may as well not have shown up that day. And I have never been able to get down how he did that, but I very liberally borrowed from him at different points. And there are still things that I do where I'll just be like, okay, like let's do Big Zig style here for a minute and see how that works out. And a lot of times it's really very different from what I normally do. And a lot of times I get good effect for a couple of rounds off of switching up the style, but it's this arcing long range. I joke about, like, you're like landing artillery strikes on people where it's out of line of sight, and it's just there's no point in them being there anymore. Like they have to go either total defense or just die. If you have the reach and you're throwing these particular angles, like that's just how it goes. And he actually passed away, I think it was 2009 or 10, and maybe even 2008, not long after I saw him, actually. But he was very, very influential on how I personally viewed reach and range and distance in the game. And like that had a big impact on me. Another one would be Leaf. Leaf is someone I unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet until, again, not long before he passed away. But Leaf was always fascinating because I watched him fight a couple of times and just almost effortlessly like punk out sword knights. I mean, it wasn't just beat them, right? Like people fighting Leaf were generally stressed out of their minds trying to keep track of what he was about to do. And he just kind of giggled through like, you never figured it out, and now you're dead. And had this whole big mythos. I don't even know what to call it. Like these legends of Leaf. While he was still an active fighter, where people talked about how he would. I have no idea if this is true, right? Like I met the guy one time, and I wish that I'd asked some of these questions. But how he, when he was new, he said that he wasn't going to pick up anything other than a single dagger until he could beat everyone at the park consistently with a single dagger, right? And then he made such an impact on single sword fighting, and this is where he gets to be personally impactful towards me, even though I hadn't like actually interacted with him at this point, is that there were stories, and there were so many stories of him just going single sword and like wrecking everything, and that there was no stopping him, and that he didn't need more equipment. Like he could have it if he wanted it, but he didn't need it. He didn't really want it. He would just go through single sword. And I watched him go through an SKBC ditch line with Flo, but he had like his short sword down in his left hand, and he was just using it. He would set up big angles and he would go doot, and he would stab sword knights, just like, oh, like, yeah, you left that spot open, it's really funny. But like, he built this idea in my head that if I tried hard enough with single sword, that I could make it into a viable style. And that is something that I end up spending a long time doing, and I enjoy the hell out of. And that was a big part of my, story development as a fighter, was me going single sword on like RW ditch fields back in the day, and figuring out how to fight people single versus flow, single versus sword and board, and then translating that back into flow and sword and board, and doing things along those lines. So I'm going to throw Leaf on there. And then, so I know what person number 4 is supposed to be for Warlords. And to be perfectly frank, I have had very little personal interaction with Brennan. Very little of it has been particularly positive. He's a good fighter. I respect that aspect of what he did, but he would not have made my Mount Rushmore regardless. So to go controversial in a different direction, and I really hope that people start a commentary on this, I'm going to say number 4 is Tisco. And the reason I'm going to say number 4 is Tisco is because Tisco, more so than anyone I've ever seen in this game and in most other activities, showed what you can do with actual concentrated effort. That I fought. Tisco started at a dag park, like 40 minutes away from me, 30 minutes away from me, something like that. So I actually, when I was taking my break from Amtgard, I went to his dag park every few months, and I was like the thing that came out of the darkness and just destroyed people, right? When he was super new, I was that guy that would show up and just like wreck the park. And I was super rusty at the time, but they were, they did not have particularly good fighters there. And Tisco came into the game. He surrounded himself with other fighters who had a drive to do things, and he put in so much effort. And I mean this in the most complimentary way that I can, that he did not come into fighting with any natural advantages that he could leverage. He didn't have faster hand speed. He didn't have, higher processing abilities than most people. There was no particular physical advantage that he had that he could leverage. The dude just put in work, and he put in so much work. And again, I mean, like I was joking about it earlier, but like paying people gas money to come and fight with him so he could learn their styles, and just like drank YouTube videos. Like, I mean, just plugged himself in like Neo. Like, I know Kung Fu, like that's what he did. Like, I know wheel style, like dude just did that. And I will never cease to be impressed off of what he did off of that. And I don't recommend his path for anyone, right? But like, oh my God, is it impressive? So he would be person number 4 on my fighting Mount Rushmore.
I like it.
God, now Battlemaster, like I don't even.
It's so new.
Yeah, God, I don't know. Like. I would say Raven is probably the best armored fighter I've ever encountered. Like, dude just goes out. It doesn't seem like it encumbers him. He has a very, very good aggressive style that normally doesn't translate super duper well into large field battles. But if you can take those extra hits from the person next to the person you're closing on to get closer and kill them, and then scavenge and then do the same thing to the next the next group of people. I mean, the dude just has momentum that he carries forward, and I would say that
in every armored class too.
Yes,
he puts on just 2 points of armor and will roll me as an assassin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I agree with that point.
Yeah, there's no making him weaker off of what equipment he has. Like he everything I've ever seen him do has been extraordinary. God, I'm trying to think of like top casters, but there are so many that are really, really talented at different aspects of casting. And the meta for that has changed so much over the years. Like I was always a very devastating caster in like V7 because healer had a spell list that had so many offensive options, along with just enough support that you wouldn't seem worthless to the rest of your team. And you just go out and you blast holes in the enemy line as a healer, and it was so fun. But I'm trying to think. I mean, like people that relatively easily could be up there, and again, largely it's limited to my local area. I've gone to a few events outside of like TD and RW, but not a ton of them. And people like Manama, Cads. Gosh, I mean, I'm trying to think of like different classes that I've seen, but a lot of these guys are playing different things. I mean, as far as like martial druid is concerned, Himori is absolutely hilarious to watch, just because I've got a polearm and I'm a druid, so like I will be your Huckleberry, and he's everybody's Huckleberry. he is down. I mean those are probably some of the best like casters that I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm sure there's going to be people who are watching this going like, how could you not name this person? And probably valid, right? There's a lot of very, very talented casters out there.
Well, and there's something to consider too. We're both from the Midwest, TD, RW. And from everything I have been told, those two kingdoms have some of, if not the best battle gamers in the game. And I think this is apparent in Phoenix League. I think this is apparent at Keep. I think this is apparent at a lot of the international competitive things. And so the fact that a lot of the people on your list are going to be RWTD, I think is completely understandable and valid.
Yeah. Yeah, I little plug for my buddy Avius is a super, super talented caster. And I mean, like
is that Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron Geen. Yeah.
Super good.
And in very significant ways, like changed the meta for Keep, right? Where like once you acknowledge that there's a person on the other team who has 40 ambulent heat weapons per life and has the stick to back that up, then you kind of have to start adjusting your team's build to acknowledge the fact that like your pole arms are going to get heated, that your best stick is going to get heated. So you kind of plan around that. And then, like there's been a little bit of back and forth on that, but like you still see at the largest games, you see someone who's like, I've got 40 heat weapons. And you're like, hey, like that guy plays at my park. I actually had the pleasure of recognizing him as the first Battlemaster of Amtgard. Cool. So like, I'm prepared for this, believe it or not. I know how this goes. And it's funny like that. But yeah, I mean, Avius is a big example. Other aspects of the game, Tanith is the, like, bar none, the best field commander that I've ever seen field, and he's another, like, local player. He's from St. Louis, and he's someone that I think it may have been kind of controversial to give him a Battlemaster because he hasn't fielded in battle games a whole lot in the past several years. But, like, he is someone that, even this past weekend, but also when I was a newbie, when he was on the other team, you have to sit there and figure out how to neutralize him, not as a fighter, not as a combatant, but if he's dead, he's not allowed to tell his team what to be doing. And if he's not telling his team what to be doing, then they're half as good as they are otherwise. Like, that dude is the weirdest force multiplier of his whole team is operating at maximum efficiency when he's up there and paying attention, that I've ever seen. I mean, like, I don't know that I have someone that I would put in, you know, like, there are people that plan better than Charlie does, better than Tanith does, I think. But, like, reacting in real time to situations while on the field, I've never seen anyone do what he does.
That reminds me of Kane. I'm sure you.
Yes, I remember Kane back in the day. I didn't field with or against him a ton, but I do remember him absolutely taking control of his section of the field. Like, this is what we're doing. You over here, you over here. You guys need to be doing this, and, you know, meet in the center and stuff like that. And yeah, like that is a major one. And I guess the last one, we're gonna go for archery, I guess. And I think the two best archers I've ever seen are oddly Sparhawk, who was a Justicar sword knight, didn't arch very often, but apparently was like a turkey hunter or something like that, like went bow hunting, and, like, dude could shoot, and he was stupid good at it. And I only saw him do it a couple of times, but every time the people were like, how is he this good at this? Like he's a sword knight. He's supposed to be a one-trick pony. He does this, the fighty whack. And, like, no, like, dude was one of the best archers I've ever watched play the game. And the other one would be Grummish. Grummish from FC back in the day used to just land shots, and we would do ridiculous things. I mean, I remember there was a 15 versus the world battle at Discord one year where Grummish was in Discord. It had, like, the base level, then there were, like, the parapets, and then there was a third level where there's, like, the one tower, and he was just up in the tower and just watching people walk into the castle and die because they weren't sitting there with their shields above their head when Grummish could see them, was extraordinary. I mean, I just consistent fast-paced accuracy at pretty much any range. I mean, like, the dude just thudded people down, and it was like every time he let fly, he was landing, and he fired quickly, and he fired at all sorts of ranges. And, I mean, I've never seen anyone else do what that guy used to do. So I guess that would be my Mount Rushmore, with a couple of different alternates on it, because I couldn't narrow it down to a single person on a couple of those. But yeah, like those would probably be like the best of those aspects of the game that I've ever seen.
I love it. So. I love getting your in-depth, like, you didn't just give me names, like, you gave me the reasons why. And I like that because, like you've said, there have been, it's like, oh, Imhog's going to be on there. Well, why? I don't know. Cause it's Imhog, you know what I mean? So I like,
because I have to say that name, you know. Yeah, you know, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are fantastic on both lists. I mean, you know, the fact of the matter is that for Mount Rushmore, I didn't want to pick like for fighting. They didn't want to pick like the top 4 fighters that ever played the game, because I don't think that's doable. I think Spin and Leaf would have been on pretty easy contenders for that one too. But like at a certain point, I have to acknowledge I didn't fight a lot of those guys a ton. Yeah. You know, I was a college kid in the Midwest. I went to one Texas event ever, and I had a great time, and I fought a lot of people, and I had a lot of fun with it. But like, yeah, it was you know, it's not like I was cutting my teeth against these people. I was around while they were around, and I saw them, and sometimes they traveled up here, and once I traveled down there, and you know, but like that's how it went. I didn't have a whole lot of cross pollination with a lot of those guys. Like I went to an SKBC, that was fun. It was a good time, but like I didn't have the money to travel. Yeah. You know? And they weren't traveling to my little backwater, not back then. So yeah, that's weird.
Awesome.
It's fun.
Well, Bighead, congratulations on your 3 recent masterhoods. I
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on to the show. Had a good time. This was a good episode. So thank you very much. For our listeners, thank you for sticking with us to the end. Had a good time. If you like this content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Share the video around. Does a whole lot for the channel. So I'm St. Godric. That's Squire Bighead. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.